We reject both major political parties. We have our own ideas about health care and everything else. And it seems only right to have one of the greatest human beings who knows not only the inside of medicine, but also the inside of the body politic. Our first guest is Dr. Ron Paul. Dr. Paul, welcome back to The Independence.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Excellent. So let me ask you, I want to take it back in history. What made you want to become a doctor?
Very interesting. When I was young, I was aware of World War II, and especially Korea. It bothered me. I became very strongly anti-war, and I was convinced in my own mind that I would never be able to pick up a rifle and shoot somebody else. And for that reason, I thought I anticipated, even as a young person, that there would be a draft. There was a draft in World War II, Korea and Vietnam. And I thought, well, if I get drafted, I will not use a rifle. I thought, well, I could stand the thought of taking care of people. And that was a strong motivation. I was good in science, so it came together, and I made the decision that being a physician made a lot more sense to me than being vulnerable to the government. So you know that even then I have a resistance to what the government was telling me what to do, and I certainly have resisted what the government wanted to tell me what to do in my practice of medicine.
All right, so what has gotten us to the point where we now have ObamaCare? How did healthcare get so bad that people thought the only solution was a new massive entitlement?
Well, it's always that one thing. There's always benefits. People like to get a free lunch, so they're teased with saying, you know, you can keep everything that you have, but we'll pay your bills for you. And a British doctor in the 1970s told me once, he said that, and when I asked him, well, why will the doctors go along with this? They won't get into it and let the government get the doctors involved. He says the government will stuff their mouths with money. And that's how it really got started in this, you know, with Medicare and Medicaid, because doctors started getting paid for cases that they were doing for charity before that. And before you know it, they were trapped, they were dependent, and it was very hard to get out of the system. I saw that coming, and that is the reason why, when I was still practicing medicine before I went to Congress, that I refused to participate in any of the government programs.
Dr. Paul, you referenced the sort of growth of Medicare and the entitlements and the sort of system of charity hospitals that it supplanted. Did it drive out the private provision of health care, especially health care to people who really couldn't afford it? Did we drive out the private market of health care delivery for poor people in this country?
No, I think we made it much worse. I can recall in the early 1960s, shortly after I had a license, I worked in a Catholic hospital, and it was both for training as well as making a couple dollars. And I would work for $3 an hour. And it wasn't much money, but I felt like I was doing something. Nobody was ever turned away. So I never saw the people out on the streets not getting medical care. And it has been the government involvement that has driven up the prices, the inefficiency, and the cost going to the middleman and everybody except the patient benefiting. So it's a total disaster. Central economic planning, no matter what you talk about, and especially in medicine now, it's the worst thing in the world. So if anybody cares about poor people getting medical care or making sure they have a decent living, they have to come around to believing that the government isn't the source of solving those problems. The government creates almost all of these problems, and we have to have a better understanding and a greater trust in how the market works. Today, doctors charge the maximum. Everybody charges the maximum because of third-party payment. And in the old days, everybody charged the minimum, or they would help somebody along. But today, the cost goes up, and the hospitals and the labs and the insurance companies and drug companies, everybody goes to the maximum because they figure they're going to get a bigger piece of the pie. And that leads, of course, to rationing and controls and dictations and telling doctors how to practice medicine. It's a total disaster.
Well, Dr. Paul, a question I've wanted to ask you in particular for a long time is, what are the limits of free market medicine? Obviously, the American Medical Association has a monopoly on both the minting of new doctors and the establishment of educational institutions for the same doctors. They also establish a lot of the rules that these new doctors are minted under, some of which are potentially dangerous. I mean, you have young medical students that are working 40 and 60 hours a week, but I'll stop filibustering and let you answer. Do you think that there is room for other agencies or other organizations to get involved in the process of creating new doctors as well?
Yeah. Yeah, we have corporate medicine, and it's state-run, local and national, and licenses are used. You should get rid of the licensing programs. I mean, patients aren't protected because I went and got a license. They should have protection because I went to a good medical school, and my patients would tell other potential patients what kind of medicine I practice. But the license doesn't do anything. All that does is exclude the competition, and it should be open. They don't need me to check on a sore throat to give somebody medication. That is not necessary. But licensing and the exclusion, matter of fact, the AMA in participation with government in the early part of the 20th century actually closed down hundreds of hospitals that were actually, appealing to minority groups and to women even before that. So the organized medicine closed that down, told them how they should practice medicine, and then, of course, then they had to have affirmative action, do all these other things. You just still have to legalize freedom of choice, and you should, and this is a tough thing to sell because a lot of people still think that the customer and the patients are protected against unethical behavior because the government requires a license. But all it does is exclude competition, whether it's real estate agents or whether it's plumbers or carpenters or anything else. The license is always there to protect a special interest group, and in medicine, it's very much the same way.
What about